How you can burn 45 pounds without 1 minute of running. If you've ever forced yourself onto a treadmill, stared at the timer, and thought, there is no way this is what I have to do for the rest of my life, you are not alone. Every week, I talk to people who are exhausted from trying to lose weight the right way. They run, they grind, they sweat, they push themselves harder and harder, and yet their body barely changes. Or worse, they lose weight only to gain it all back again. Today, I'm going to show you how one of the fastest fat loss transformations I've helped guide. It was 45 pounds in about 4 months, and it happened without a single minute of running. We'll call him Alex, and more importantly, I'm going to show you why a completely different approach to movement can make fat loss feel less like punishment and more like momentum. Why effort alone doesn't create fat loss. One of the biggest psychological traps in weight loss is believing that results are directly proportional to how hard something feels. If it feels brutal, it must be working. If you're drenched in sweat, it must be effective. If you're exhausted, you must be making progress. But biology doesn't always reward effort in the way we expect. High-intensity cardio can absolutely burn calories. There's no debate about that. The problem is what happens after the workout. People often experience increased hunger and less spontaneous movement the rest of the day. Higher fatigue levels and greater desire for comfort foods is the result. So while they burn energy during the session, they unconsciously compensate afterward. This is why someone can run regularly and still struggle to create a meaningful calorie deficit. This was Alex's issue. It's not a discipline issue, it's a system issue. When we stopped focusing on heroic workouts and started focusing on sustainable daily behavior, everything changed. Think about this. How many times have you exercised hard and then later felt like you deserved a reward? That feeling is incredibly common, and it can quietly cancel out your progress. The hidden fat loss lever most people ignore. The real breakthrough came when Alex shifted his attention towards something called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. This refers to all the calories you burn from normal daily movement: standing, walking, carrying things, doing chores, changing posture. Individually, these actions feel insignificant, but over the course of an entire day, they can represent hundreds of calories, and over weeks, thousands. Modern life has quietly engineered movement out of our routines. We sit to work, sit to commute, sit to relax. Then we attempt to undo 10 sedentary hours with a single intense session. It's like trying to bail out a sinking boat with a coffee mug. So we changed the environment. Fat loss became something that happened continuously, not just during workouts. Walking became the foundation of the Alex transformation. Not because walking is glamorous, not because it looks impressive, but because it is sustainable. We set a consistent step target, 5,000 a day to start. At first, it felt almost too easy. There was no adrenaline rush, no dramatic exhaustion, but something powerful happened. Movement started happening automatically, instead of needing motivation to exercise. Movement became integrated into daily life. Short trips were walked instead of driven. Phone calls became pacing opportunities. Errands became calorie-burning events. Over time, daily energy expenditure increased significantly, and because stress remained lower, appetite was easier to manage. Fat loss accelerated without emotional burnout. Imagine two people. One runs intensely for 30 minutes and then spends the rest of the day sitting. The other moves lightly and frequently for 12 hours. Which person quietly burns more energy by the end of the week? The identity shift that changes everything. One of the most profound changes wasn't physical. It was psychological. Instead of seeing fat loss as something that happens during workouts, we began to see movement as part of identity. Standing instead of sitting, choosing stairs automatically, remaining on your feet during conversations. These small actions create a subtle but powerful shift. You stop thinking, I need motivation to work out, and start thinking, I'm just someone who moves more. Identity-based habits require less willpower. They feel natural, predictable, repeatable, and repeatability is what produces lasting results. Let's recap. So far, the system looks like this: less reliance on punishing cardio, more reliance on continuous movement and walking as a daily anchor. When you shift toward activity, this creates a sustainable energy deficit. Why hunger is the real enemy. Many diets fail not because people lack knowledge, but because they underestimate hunger. When appetite is constantly high, food becomes mentally dominant. So instead of focusing purely on calorie reduction, we focused on fullness. When meals were structured around protein and volume, the protein supports fullness. It also helps preserve lean tissue and requires more energy to digest. This reduces the emotional roller coaster of dieting. When you're satisfied, you make calmer decisions. When you're starving, you negotiate with yourself. Think about this. How often do you eat because you're tired, not because you're actually hungry? Removing friction from fat loss. Another major success was reducing decision fatigue. Instead of constantly tracking macros or experimenting with new recipes, we simplified things. We used a small rotation of meals that were enjoyable, predictable, and aligned with fat loss goals. This dramatically improved consistency because every extra decision creates an opportunity for deviation. Hydration also played a larger role than most people expect. Mild dehydration can feel like hunger. It reduces energy and it increases cravings. Correcting this improves adherence to movement and nutrition habits. Finally, we addressed sleep. It's a fat loss multiplier. Sleep influences appetite hormones. Sleep acts as an impulse control. Poor sleep increases cravings for high-energy foods, it lowers patience, and it reduces resilience. When sleep improved, everything else became easier. Movement felt lighter. Food decisions improved. Consistency increased. Fat loss accelerated, not because effort increased, but because resistance decreased. The daily non-exercise framework. If you want a practical structure to begin with, increase daily movement opportunities. Hit consistent step targets. Aim for 5,000 and build meals around satisfaction. Reduce unnecessary sitting. Protect sleep quality. These habits seem small individually, but repeated daily, they create profound change. The real lesson. If you've been trying to force fat loss through suffering, it may be time to change the question. Instead of asking, "How hard can I push today?" ask, "How can I make fat loss happen more naturally?" Because real transformation rarely comes from heroic bursts. It comes from quiet consistency, when movement becomes part of your identity, when food supports your goals instead of fighting them, when recovery protects your decisions. Fat loss stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling inevitable. If this non-exercise approach makes more sense to you than cardio burnout, hit the like button and subscribe for more no BS fitness advice.